From CNN, Putin signs expanded anti-LGBTQ laws in Russia in latest crackdown on rights.
I was just about to say this.
Is that what they're calling it, huh? So the new laws make it illegal to promote or praise LGBTQ relationships, publicly express non-heterosexual orientations, or suggest that they are normal. The package of amendments signed by Putin include heavier penalties for anyone promoting non-traditional sexual relations and or preferences, as well as pedophilia and gender transition. Under the new law, it will be banned across the internet, media, books, audio, visual services, cinema, and advertising. So Ian was just asking why the U.S. is trying to go to war with Russia. Well, the U.S. is very much in favor of all of these things, and Russia opposes them.
Well, I think it's not just like that. I think when we look at examples like Saudi Arabia, they commit far more atrocious things than what happens in Russia, and there far more is a bigger cultural difference with Saudi Arabia than Russia. I think it's even deeper than this. There's another article by Fox News that I think is worth pulling up, and it's titled "Wall Street CEOs Funding China's Military and Human Rights Abuses. Here's Why." And when we look at the rise of China, it is partly responsible because of many Western elites, the Rockefellers, Henry Kissinger, and of course a lot of the foreign policy that shipped American jobs and labor overseas. So there is an effort to globalize the world, but more importantly, control the world. And in China, you see a lot of very powerful billionaires in America financing that movement. You see Bill Gates, you see Klaus Schwab saying they're doing great work when they're locking people inside of their homes and there's fires there and literally people die because of these fires. Now when we see that when we look at this COVID-0 policy, these are policies that a lot of people want to implement all over the world. So why is Russia at odds here and China isn't? Well, that should be something that should have a lot of people thinking what's really going on here, because it's not just cultural differences. I think there's a bigger agenda trying to make China a perfect example for the rest of the world. I think that's what they're going after. I think that's what they're trying.
What's the situation with the Chinese riots, revolution? I mean, it looks like people all across the country were stepping up and in crowds and like overthrowing the government. I mean, it looks like that's what they were attempting to do. What's going on there?
That's what I was saying. I mean, I saw that Klaus Schwab said that the Chinese model, needed to be implemented everywhere else. And then the Chinese people themselves were pushing back because, they're dying in these fires. They're still being locked up by their government. They have their QR codes that dictate where they can travel, if they can leave or not. As far as I'm concerned, the Chinese are still pushing back. I'm not sure. We all know that it's very difficult to see what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, it's very hard to verify all the news coming from there because there are some reports saying that the Chinese government is getting rid of restrictions, getting rid of some lockdowns, and allowing people to quarantine inside of their own homes. But there's also more video footage of police officers and these, white hooded crazy individuals busting down doors and asking and demanding people's cell phones so they could go through all the data, making sure that they didn't share anything through Bluetooth, and also
through
more
AirDrop. Huh?
AirDrop, which Apple isn't a big fan of and has stopped in China. Very interestingly, the same Apple that of course makes very grand statements about George Floyd here domestically and makes very big statements about injustice here domestically, but doesn't seem to really care about it when it's at their Foxconn factory facilities that are up in arms and revolting.
So. Well, we want cheap stuff,
Yeah.
I want to work. Come on.
I wonder if you could make it so when someone bought an item, they felt the pain and suffering of every human that made the item. And then that would have to decide if they were going to buy it or not. You have to feel that whenever
there's
you
an
use
interesting question about that, though. For some of these people who, this is the way it's often described when people are positive towards like sweatshop labor. They say these people live in underdeveloped regions. Are they better off with no money per day starving or $1 per day working? What do you think?
I mean, that's
probably working.
See, I guess the issue is, it's none of our effing business. It would be better if an American worker was getting $15 an hour to do that same labor, and they can figure out their own issues. You want to invest in the development of that nation, by all means, go ahead and do so. That sounds fantastic. Sounds very nice of you to help these people, rise up, become better, and build better lives. But why take jobs and industry from the United States, where American workers need these jobs, and then send them over to these countries because it's effectively slave labor?
Because they can sell the iPhone for $700 instead of $1,900, what it would cost if we built it over in the United States, probably.
Well, look, if they built it here, the iPhone would still cost the same thing. Their margins would be lower. So they build it over there, ship it back here. My favorite story is how they make skateboards. They cut down trees in Canada, send those trees to China, where they're turned into skateboards and then sent to California to get put into warehouses and distributed across the U.S. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But it's because it is cheaper to burn all of that energy sending lumber to China than it is just to pay a North American worker to do work. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's look, when they talk about climate change and all that stuff, supporting the American worker, one of the best things you can do to prevent climate change. Stop overdeveloping other nations. How about that? You're concerned about carbon? Then stop building factories in these countries. You want to reduce climate change? Stop burning all the fuel? Stop shipping goods to China for manufacturing? Just do it here.
Yeah. Stop planned obsolescence. Stop these products being made in a way that they break down within a year or 2 years, so you have to buy a new one. Again, this larger kind of consumerism, this larger quasi-corporate, quasi-government policy that has been instituted on everyone doesn't work in anyone's favor and is essentially a larger scam against everyone. So this is what we need to realize. Everything, everywhere we look, it's a scam. How else can you answer that question?
You mean like capitalism is a scam?
No.
You said everything everywhere.
Spit that word. I'm saying the way that the system is designed, the way that the system runs, the way that the system has been finagled for the personal benefit of a lot of these billionaires that do support China, that want China to be an example for the rest of the world. That right there is rigged. Apple is supporting the Chinese government. The U.S. government is now dependent on the Chinese government, on those factories, on everything being shipped to the United States, including, of course, our medicine, our vitamins, our supplements, all the plastic, all the trinkets, all of that is being made in China right now, and we are dependent on it because we got rid of our own industry. We got rid of our own infrastructure.
Right.
We took the jobs. We took the factories. We had them here. We had the infrastructure to make things that would actually last, would actually be good, and we said, no, we're just going to send them over to China to run this larger Ponzi scheme on everyone, and the person who did it was David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger with their open China policy. Kissinger still is being adored by Donald Trump, adored by Joe Biden, adored by Obama. Obama's national security advisor said that they took their daily orders from Henry Kissinger. This guy's still calling the shots here. This is absolutely crazy and bewildering that we're living in a society where we're just being scammed every single day.
How old is Kissinger? He's still around?
Yes, he's still around. He's still giving
99,
speeches.
I think he's 99. Didn't he? Was he the
99?
architect of the Vietnam War?
I don't know if you could call him the architect, but there was many human rights violations that he committed in Cambodia, in the south of Asia, in Chile, in Latin America, in the Middle East. This guy is also the figurehead of the petrodollar. I mean, this guy's behind almost every nook and corner of secret society, whether it's the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, or the Bilderberg Group. This guy's behind all of these organizations, calling the shots, essentially telling people what to do.
He's 99, by the way.
Yeah.
But see, when he passes, is there anyone who can take that mantle and provide that same advice or control?
There's probably a whole bunch of other people that are in secret, his underlings. Klaus Schwab was working.
Little Kissinger Jr.'s?
Yeah. Klaus Schwab was working with Henry Kissinger very closely as well. They're very closely associated. Klaus Schwab was a student of Kissinger. So that's another human being. But the next person we're not going to be hearing about. The next person is working in secret, is working in the shadows, and they're implementing policies. They're probably setting the policies right now that we don't even know about.
I'm concerned that they're not American, that they're like corporate, they live in
They're
Switzerland.
globalists.
Right.
They don't care about America. They
That's-
never cared about America.
Like
they never
Kissinger
gave
cared.
a damn about this country. David Rockefeller bragged in his own autobiography how he specifically wanted to destroy American sovereignty. These are individuals that openly brag. I came up to David Rockefeller. I was like, you said this in your book. How dare you? He got mad and then ran in his car. But at the end of the day, these people love to brag about how they're destroying this larger experiment that in the first time in almost all of recorded human history has allowed individuals to have rights and the ability to defend themselves. That is their chief mortal enemy that they are trying to get rid of at all costs. They want you to be fat. They want you to be sad. They want you to not be able to defend yourself. They want you to be a slave, and that's essentially the system that they're building.
Yeah.
How else can you say it's not being built?
I kind of think they don't want you to exist at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's not that they want you to die. It's that they don't want you to be alive. There's too
Honestly,
many
I
of
think
you.
that's why we're going to see this big push as well for transhumanism and Neuralink, because that's the next natural step to this. I feel like, the TikTok generation where everyone is tied to their phones, we have this entire generation that is very subservient because they're so tied to their phone, they're so distracted that they're not paying attention to what's actually happening in the modern day, which is why the government is so easily able to come in and usher in all of these totalitarian rule and whatnot. The next natural progression to that is transhumanism. I know Libby Emmons was talking about how, you get the chip implanted in your brain. At that point, how do you know what is your own thought or a thought being implemented via AI? And then at that point, are you just another product of technology? Are you just another, what was the word that she used? I can't remember off the top of my head, but essentially, yeah, everything's just going to crap, guys.
There are two shows that I would recommend. There's an episode of Stargate SG-1 where they go to so for the, you know Stargate, there's a portal, they go through it, they find other planets. And so in one, they send in this drone first, and it's like a wasteland. But then all of a sudden, there's like a flash, and they're in this beautiful looking city. And what it is this planet had a pollution problem, everybody dies, but there's this force field surrounding the small town. Everybody's networked to this machine, and there's 1,800 people who live here. What they eventually discover is that initially the city had millions, but the power is running out, so the force field is shrinking and people are dying. So to maintain the system, people have to be culled. So the computer was wiping their brains of memories of people who were being sacrificed, and they didn't know. So they meet a guy. Then later in the day, they watch the guy walk out to his death, and they're like, "What was that?" And they're like, "Who are you talking about? That person never lived here. We've always been a small city." Then there's an episode of Outer Limits where it's called The Stream or something, where there are these Wi-Fi nodes everywhere, and everybody's got a brain chip, and they don't realize that their thoughts are implanted. They think they're individuals. They think they're living their normal life, but they're acting at the behest of the machine or whatever.
And that's the danger of the brain chip. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, Savannah, really quickly, and then we could go to Ian.
You're echoing what I'm thinking.
But I just want to ask you specifically, what do you think the end game is? What do you think is their goal?
I think the end game is to create an entire population that is subservient to the government, that is, tied to AI, transhumanism, where we're not fighting back, we're not pushing back. Why is censorship so important right now? Because we are highlighting that these issues are prevalent and that they're happening. But the government wants to come in and they want everybody to be distracted. One of the things that I focus in on, and I've been thinking about this a lot because there's a part of me that thinks sometimes that what I do is useless, because I can sit here all day long and scream to high heaven about what is happening in society, but it really is up to the masses to actually act on it, right? So what is the true solution to this? And the true solution is traditional family and instilling that, because, for example, the New York Post just put out this article that talked about these parents having to send their kids to counseling because of all of the drug abuse that's happening, and these kids are being exposed to it. It's horrifying them. These parents are the ones that are thinking of moving out of the big cities. Crime rates and drug use are affecting these people specifically because they have a family, and that's at the forefront from them. That's why in our society today, we're trying to destroy traditional values, to destroy traditional family, because then the average person doesn't really care about what's going on. Then the average person is just tied to their cell phone. They don't really care. Okay, they'll live in the pod, they'll watch porn all day. They're I guess living off of the whatever app that they're living through. Sorry, I'm completely butchering this, but the point that I'm trying to make here is I feel like the ultimate end game is to have an entire population that's not going to push back against a one world government.
Yeah, that very much scares me about implanting memory. I think you're really onto something with that, because memory itself is flawed. No human has perfect memory. I think the things I think may or may not have been what really happened. Sometimes I'm just wrong. I'll say it and I'll go back and I'll review the tape and I'll be like, oh, what I remembered was different than what happened. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine that. I mean, with TV and radio, that's already manipulating our thoughts and memories. I think you might be onto it. A muted or docile populace is helpful for a government in some ways, so that the populace doesn't overtake the government.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.